Dwight D. Eisenhower's speech on Atoms for Peace was highly effective because he spoke about how to handle atomic weapons while speaking very reasonably and optimistically at a time after the war where the U.S. did not know what to do with our nuclear weapons or how to respond to enemies of the Union. Right after the Second World War, there was a period of confusion on foreign policy and what to do with our nuclear weapons. Eisenhower helped clear things up by speaking confidently and very frank about the situation. Everything about President Eisenhower's speech was very professional, starting with the way he dressed and presented himself. Also, he speaks very presidential and professionally from his word choice and sentence structure, which makes him seem very intelligent on the subject. All of that is part of his ethos in his speech. Ethos in his address is probably what is working best for him. He was the president of the time, which that in and of itself is a large appeal to character, but what really makes him credible is that he was general of the Allied forces of Europe in World War II. So at the time of this speech, there is no one more credible and regarded as high as President Eisenhower. Eisenhower states, "I would use the office, which for the time being I hold, to assure you that the government of the United States will remain steadfast in its support of this body." He directly acknowledges his presidency, which appeals to his character, which helps his following statement that the United States will still support the United Nations throughout this time of confusion. President Eisenhower speaking directly to the UN in this fashion helps him find some middle ground with his audience. Another aspect of the way President Eisenhower speaks is a sense of optimism throughout his address. For example, President Eisenhower states when talking directly to the audience, "In the conviction that you will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, and the faith, which can bring to this world lasting peace for all nations, and happiness and well-being for all men." You get this sense of hope and happiness. Throughout the speech, President Eisenhower stays centered and very reasonable. The sense of optimism works in a way that also appeals to logic. He states things that everyone in the audience can get behind. He goes on by saying, "If hope exists in the mind of one nation, that hope should be shared by all. And the atomic age has moved forward at such a pace that every citizen of the world should have some comprehension, at least in comparative terms, of the extent of this development," which is something everyone in the audience most likely agrees with. And that helps him by having the audience see him as someone who wants the best and the safety for all people of all nations. The combination of these two quotes saw the optimistic and reasonable approach of President Eisenhower took on this speech. There's a natural pathos simply by the speech being given at the time that it is. Right after the war, the United States using the atomic bombs on Japan. Although the United States won the war, the loss of life and the sheer power of the weapons was something the whole world felt the need to address. The topic of nuclear weapons was something that needed to be focused on and made sure they were not used again. In President Eisenhower's mind, that meant the U.S. should have them to keep other countries in check. President Eisenhower doesn't pull any punches when talking about the necessity of having a nuclear arsenal. He states, "I feel impelled to speak today in a language that, in a sense, is new, one which I, who have spent so much of my military profession, would have preferred never to use. That new language is the language of atomic warfare." When he said that, you get a sense of how serious the situation is. When a highly regarded military general does not want to speak of something, you know that it is a polarizing topic that will be seen as fearful to most people. On top of the sense of fear that you see in the speech, there's also a sense of unity. Again, with it being right after the war, Allied countries wanted to stick together to prevent a large-scale war that just ended not long ago. If a danger exists in the world, it is a danger shared by all. President Eisenhower is saying how if there is an enemy, we must come together to defeat it. That sense of unity works well in this speech, given that it is being delivered to the UN, who above anything else wants to stay away from any kind of war. Overall, President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech was effective because of his reasonable tone and his optimistic approach to foreign relations. Given that ethos was a large part of his speech, logos and pathos also served a big role in persuading the United Nations the benefits of having a nuclear arsenal in their right hands.